By the summer of 1944, the war in Western Europe had entered a brutal new phase. Victory would no longer be decided by who possessed the strongest machine, but by who could think faster, move quicker, and strike with ruthless coordination. What unfolded in the French countryside that August was not a clash of equals, but a quiet execution of a myth. Proof that even the most feared weapon can fail when it meets the wrong kind of enemy. This is not a story about a single battle map or a named village. It is the story of how momentum crushed legend, and how the Tiger tank, once believed unstoppable, met the limits of its power. August 1944, France. German headquarters watched the situation unravel hour by hour. General Patton's Third Army was surging forward with terrifying speed. Towns vanished from German control almost overnight. Entire formations were being cut off before they could react. The defensive line in France was bending, then beginning to break. Desperation set in. The German command reached for its most feared weapon. They unleashed the Tigers. 72 Panzer VI Tiger tanks, massive, heavily armored, mounting the most lethal gun fielded by any tank in the war, were rushed directly into Patton's projected path. On paper, it was a decisive move. Each Tiger could annihilate multiple American Shermans before suffering serious damage. In theory, this force should have slammed the brakes on the American advance. Instead, it became a lesson written in burned steel. When the fighting ended, fewer than 10 Tigers remained operational. The rest were destroyed, immobilized, abandoned, or captured. Patton's army did not pause. It did not slow. It simply rolled on. This was the moment the myth of the invincible Tiger died. To understand why, you first have to understand what made the Tiger so terrifying. The Panzer VI. Tiger was not a tank. It was a fortress on tracks. 56 tons of steel, frontal armor so thick that most Allied anti-tank rounds shattered uselessly against it. And then there was the gun. The 80mm cannon, a weapon capable of killing any Allied tank at distances where return fire was meaningless. Allied crews feared Tigers for good reason. A single Tiger could paralyze an entire column. The American Sherman, reliable, mobile, but lightly armored, was completely outmatched in a straight fight. It often took 4 or 5 Shermans to bring down one Tiger, and even then, the Tiger usually claimed several victims first. The numbers were merciless. In direct engagements, Tigers almost always won. German propaganda elevated them to legend. Allied soldiers whispered about them as if they were indestructible, but they were not. They had weaknesses, and Patton understood them better than most. First, Tigers were slow. On roads, they struggled to reach 25 miles per hour, and off-road movement was worse. They could not chase a retreating enemy, and they could not rapidly reposition once committed. Second, they were mechanically fragile. The Tiger's engine and transmission were complex and unreliable. Breakdowns were common. For every Tiger destroyed in combat, another was often lost to mechanical failure alone. Third, fuel. Tigers devoured it. Less than 1 mile per gallon. By 1944, Germany's fuel shortages were critical. Tigers could, and often did, run dry before ever reaching the front. And most importantly, Tigers were defensive weapons. They excelled when dug in, hull down, firing at long range. In that environment, they were nearly unbeatable. But force them to move, to react, to chase chaos, and their flaws became fatal. The Germans knew this, but they had no choice. Patton was advancing too fast. Traditional defenses were collapsing. They needed something overwhelming, so they committed nearly an entire battalion of Tigers. 72 machines meant to halt an army. It should have worked. It didn't. While other Allied commanders treated Tigers as threats to avoid, Patton prepared to destroy them. He had studied German armor doctrine obsessively. He knew Tigers relied on long-range firepower and positional superiority, and he built his response around denying them both. Patton's approach rested on 5 uncompromising principles. First, never fight on the Tiger's terms. Long-range duels were suicide. Use terrain, smoke, speed, and angles. Attack where the armor was weakest. Second, combined arms. Tigers could dominate tanks, but not artillery, infantry, and aircraft striking together. Overwhelm them from multiple directions at once. Third, destroy their lifelines. Tigers depended on fuel, ammunition, and constant maintenance. Hit their supply dumps, bomb their convoys, force them to move, and they would destroy themselves. Fourth, never stop advancing. Tigers were built to punish hesitation. Movement denied them control. Constant pressure forced breakdowns, mistakes, and panic. Fifth, and most controversial, accept losses. Patton understood a brutal truth. Avoiding Tigers cost time, and time gave the Germans space to rebuild defenses. Better to lose tanks and keep moving than to stop and let the enemy recover. These ideas were drilled into every level of the Third Army. Tank commanders were forbidden to retreat from Tiger contact. Artillery units trained to respond within minutes. Fighter bombers were prioritized for anti-armor strikes. Patton's army didn't encounter Tigers. It hunted them. Late August 1944. German intelligence predicted Patton's routes and positioned the Tigers accordingly. Hull down behind terrain, guns covering open ground. It was textbook heavy armor defense. American tanks would advance, be destroyed at range, and the offensive would stall. That was the plan. Instead, American reconnaissance spotted the Tigers early. Within hours, Patton reshaped his entire advance. Multiple columns, different routes, constant motion. When contact came, there were no heroic frontal charges. There was artillery. Massive, relentless barrages, not to destroy Tigers outright, but to blind them. Shells slammed around the tanks, forcing crews to button up, closing hatches, stripping away visibility. As the Tigers endured the storm, American tank destroyers moved, fast, aggressive, purpose-built to kill armor. They weren't meant to trade blows. They were meant to flank. Side shots punched through weaker armor. Ammunition cooked off. Turrets blew apart. Then came the sky. P-47. Thunderbolts roared overhead, rockets and bombs screaming down. They didn't always kill Tigers, but they broke tracks, smashed engines, shattered nerves. German crews were attacked from every direction at once. Artillery, tank destroyers, aircraft. And through it all, Sherman tanks kept rolling past, ignoring the Tigers, pushing deeper toward objectives beyond them. This was exactly the kind of fight Tigers could not survive. The first Tigers fell not in dramatic duels, but to inevitability. One threw a track while repositioning under fire, immobilized, abandoned. Another ran dry. Its fuel convoy had been destroyed miles back. A recovery attempt disabled 2 more Tigers, all abandoned. 3 were destroyed by tank destroyers striking from the flanks while the Tigers focused forward. 2 were hit by rockets, 1 immobilized, 1 burning through the engine deck. All of it happened in less than 6 hours. The Germans expected days. They got hours. Because Patton never stopped. He didn't regroup, he didn't slow down. He unleashed everything at once and kept moving forward. And in doing so, he proved something that echoed across the rest of the war. Superior weapons mean nothing without speed, coordination, and will. The Tiger was never invincible. It was simply misunderstood, until it met Patton. Nightfall, Day 1. By the time darkness settled over the battlefield, the outcome was already tilting decisively. More than 20 Tigers were gone, destroyed outright or abandoned where they stood. The surviving crews were shaken. They had entered the fight expecting dominance. Instead, they found themselves stalked from every direction by an enemy that refused to pause, regroup, or give them breathing room. German tank commanders began sending frantic messages up the chain, requests for infantry screens, for air cover, for tighter coordination with artillery units. But Patton's advance had already shattered German command and control. Communications lagged. Orders arrived too late or not at all. The Tigers, meant to be the iron core of a coordinated defense, were instead fighting alone, isolated machines in disconnected battles. Day 2. If the first day was shocking, the second was brutal. American forces now knew exactly where the Tigers were positioned. Before dawn, artillery zeroed in on those locations. During the night, tank destroyers crept into ambush positions. When the Tigers attempted to shift at first light, they were already under fire, bracketed, suppressed, and blind. Mechanical failures multiplied. Constant movement, exhausted crews, and the absence of proper maintenance facilities took their toll. Tigers that would have been devastating from prepared defensive positions broke down while simply trying to move. Engines failed, transmissions gave out, tracks snapped under stress. By the end of the second day, German commanders could no longer deny reality. The Tiger deployment had failed, not because the Tiger was a poor weapon, but because Patton's tempo had turned its strengths into liabilities. Day 3. Withdrawal. On the third day, orders went out to pull the surviving Tigers back. The retreat proved just as lethal as the fight. Tigers were slow. American forces were not. Tank destroyers caught retreating Tigers from behind, punching through the thinner rear armor. Fuel shortages became critical. Supply lines were in chaos. Some Tigers simply ran dry and were blown up by their own crews to avoid capture. Others never made it that far. Mechanical breakdowns littered the withdrawal routes, burned out transmissions, seized engines, shattered tracks. Disabled Tigers stood like gravestones along the road. And Patton never eased the pressure. American artillery hammered retreat corridors. Fighter bombers tore into German columns from above. Tank destroyers harassed any unit that tried to form a rear guard. The message was clear. There would be no recovery, no pause, no second chance. One captured German officer later summed it up with brutal clarity. "We expected a battle. What we got was a pursuit. Your forces never stopped long enough for us to establish a defensive position." That was the essence of Patton's method. Tigers were most dangerous when stationary and prepared, so he made certain they were never stationary and never prepared. The aftermath. When the surviving Tigers finally withdrew beyond Patton's immediate reach, the numbers told the story. Of the 72 Tigers committed to stop the Third Army, fewer than 10 remained operational. The rest were destroyed, abandoned, captured, or deliberately demolished by their own crews. The road ahead lay open. The weapon meant to halt, Patton hadn't even slowed him. So what went wrong? The answer goes far beyond World War II. Superior technology does not guarantee victory. On paper, the Tiger outclassed the Sherman in almost every measurable way. But war is not a contest of specifications. It is a contest of systems, doctrine, and execution. Tactics beat hardware. Patton's combined arms approach, tanks, artillery, air power, and tank destroyers working in unison, overwhelmed the Tiger's individual superiority. One Tiger could defeat one Sherman. It could not survive artillery, aircraft, and flanking units all at once. Speed and tempo mattered more than firepower. Tigers could destroy more American tanks per engagement, but Patton dictated when and where engagements happened. The Tigers never had the chance to fully exploit their advantages. Logistics proved decisive. Tigers required fuel, ammunition, and constant maintenance. Patton's advance disrupted German supply lines so thoroughly that many Tigers were lost without ever being decisively defeated in combat. Morale mattered. Tiger crews went into battle expecting dominance. When they instead found themselves hunted, blinded, and overwhelmed, their confidence and effectiveness collapsed. At its core, the failure was doctrinal. The Tiger was designed for defensive warfare, holding ground, covering retreats, counterattacking to restore lines. The Germans used it exactly as intended. But Patton's speed ensured that those defensive battles never fully formed. By the time Tigers were ready, American forces were already past them, around them, or calling in airstrikes on top of them. Other Allied commanders fought the battle the Tiger was built for: slow advances, tank versus tank duels, set-piece engagements. Patton refused that fight. He fought a war of movement, coordination, and relentless pressure, one where the Tiger's advantages became irrelevant. Captured German crews said it again and again during interrogations. They hadn't been beaten by better tanks. One commander put it plainly: "We never fought the same enemy twice. First artillery, then aircraft, then tank destroyers, then infantry. By the time we reacted to one threat, two more appeared." That was Patton's doctrine in practice. Everything at once, all the time. The destruction of the Tiger Battalion carried consequences far beyond this battle. German High Command had committed its best armor to stop Patton and failed completely. Any remaining belief that superweapons could compensate for American momentum and coordination was shattered. From that point on, when German intelligence identified Patton's forces in a sector, commanders knew the truth. Defensive positions were unreliable. Superior equipment was not enough. Without overwhelming numbers, the only option was withdrawal. For American troops, the lesson was equally powerful. Tigers could be beaten, consistently, if confronted with the right tactics and the right tempo. Not easily, not cheaply, but decisively. 72 Tigers were sent to stop Patton. Fewer than 10 survived. This was no miracle, no accident. It was the result of leadership, coordination, and a commander who understood a timeless rule of war. When the enemy is stronger, don't fight them where they are strong. Change the battle itself. The Germans sent their best weapons to stop Patton. What they discovered was simple and fatal. The best weapons in the world mean nothing if your enemy never lets you use them. The road ahead lay open. and Patton never looked back. What do you think made the decisive difference? American tactics or German mistakes? Share your thoughts in the comments.